should be live. Haha.
Oh,
Welcome to anybody and everybody who is here. We haven't had any comments in the stream yet, but I'm sure there'll be somebody lurking in the dark waiting for someone else to go first. That's okay. With me today is a new friend to the channel. We haven't seen this person before. This is Ray, the Scottish Fool, which is a channel name I quite adore, I have to say.
it was
Tell us a
such a
little bit
last
about
minute. It was such a I just started my channel a couple of months ago, and I was like thinking, what do I pick? And then I'm Scottish. I like the Fool. I like Robin Hobb, and I was like, let me just pick this quickly, and I'll decide later. But it's just kind of stuck now, so too late.
I knew someone would be first. Hi, Shad. How you doing? And we've got Samwise. Goodness, you've come to see me live. That's a little unusual. I feel a bit honoured. Thanks. Matt, you can stay for a little while, but you have to go before we get to the end. Because Matt, while he has read the series, still hasn't got past the Rainwilds. He's waiting for a time he can do a reread and catch up so that I can talk to him about the whole series. So we'll start at the beginning. How did you discover Robin Hobb? Was it in a bookshop, through BookTube, through friends, word of mouth? How did you find?
So for me, I got into not just Robin Hobb, but just with reading. Like I got into reading way later. It wasn't until high school that I really found that I enjoyed reading. Like I always thought I found it. I was like, books are boring, whatever.
Yeah.
But it was like the end of 2014. I got into I feel like I'm like going on a tangent, but I got into Cassandra Clare books, and she's really the reason I got into reading in general. I went on YouTube and discovered BookTube for that. But through that, it was like I think the next year, the YouTuber Sam from Sam's Nonsense. I think she has a different channel name now, Sam's Cozy Corner. I think she was a huge Robin Hobb fan, and she was the first person I remember talking about it. And she did I think she met Robin Hobb at a signing. Like I was like, it was like I can't remember. It must have been for Fool's Quest. I'm guessing it was 2015,
Yeah.
or one of those books. And she did this full list. It was after the final book had come out, and she did a ranking and everything. And I remember thinking it would sound so interesting, but I was way too young or way too immature in my reading to read it at that point. So I think I tried reading it, and I was too young. So it wasn't until, but I always had that at the back of my mind, as I read more series, and it wasn't until 2022, 2023 that I finally started. And yeah, I knew immediately, from 100 pages in, I think my Goodreads update was my life is about to change. I just could tell. It'd been so long since I had that moment, honestly, where I just knew immediately that it was something different, something so yeah, so I read Assassin's Apprentice that month and really liked it, and yeah, just from then on.
Nice. Has there been any point as you've read through where you've gone, okay, I've had enough of the story, or have you tried to stop yourself binging? Because I found that some people are happy to take massive breaks between the trilogies. Some people want to just go straight through. How did you go through?
Mine was pretty, I don't know, I feel like everyone has a unique experience.
Yeah.
So with me, it was, I think I read book 1 in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and then book 2 I read over a full month. I don't know how I prolonged it. I can't wait to reread it and read it in 3 days. Just because I know I'll have such a different experience. But anyways, I read that over a month, and then I started Assassin's Quest, and I read about 200 pages, and then I was enjoying it, but I put it down, and I didn't go back to it till 6 months later. And then that ended up, and then I picked that up in December of that year, and I inhale read the last bit of that in
Nice.
4 days. It was just, and that book changed everything for me. That's probably one of my favorites, and I'll get on to that later on because I know a lot of people struggle with that one. But I
Yep,
just,
they do.
I was so blown away by that book, and that was like, I think what really put her over the edge from like other authors. So then after that, it was like the end of the year, and then I immediately read Live Ship and 20 Man in like 2 months. Like I
Nice.
read 1 month one, and then, so it's so different, like from going like 1 year, spreading over a year, to like 2 months reading like the next two.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then Rainworld, I think I read over the summer, and I did like, I felt full break, so I was like, I can't make myself like finish this so quickly. So I waited till the end of last year to start the final ones, and I read the finale in January.
Wow.
So
That's
yeah, it's been
pretty
a
good
journey.
going. It makes me quite happy that you took quite a big break after Tawny Man. It is something I recommend to people because the
Yeah.
story needs to take a breath, and I find it works better for people then going into Rainbow. Did you sort of have a particular storyline or a particular character that really resonated with you, or was there people that you just like, I could really do without this character? Where do you kind of stand with that? Because obviously Hob and her character work is
Yeah. So obviously it's kind of, my YouTube channel is Scottish Fool, so clearly, I'm a bit biased. I do really like the Fool, but I don't even know if the Fool is actually my favorite character. That kind of just worked out just when I was looking at names. I think, I don't know, an underrated character that I love, that I want to talk about in a minute, is Carson. Cedric and Carson, I
yay.
am obsessed with them. Like,
It's lovely.
I feel like Hobb wrote like that book for me, and like I feel like there's a couple other people. Like I feel like there's a couple others who like really like Dragonhaven, that book in particular. And if you get it, you get it, like that book, because it's not like the most flashy book. It's not like stuff is happening, but it just, the character work in that book. Oh, I just love it. But yeah,
Yeah,
Cedric and
it is.
Carson, I think, are like some underrated ones that I really like. But the full Kettrick from Live Ship, I would say, who's my favorite from Live Ship? I mean, Malta, of course, but it's like, I mean, I'm not really saying any like unobvious answers. It's kind of like,
It's more a question of sort of how quickly are they resonating with you, and sometimes it
oh
can
yeah,
be, what is it about a particular character that really touches you?
mm,
And it's always fascinating because all of them are so well rounded. I love that you brought up Carson. I think he's just one of the most remarkably lovely characters, and I think he's also probably one of the healthiest. I've been talking about this in one of my Discord. I don't have a Discord, in someone else's Discord, about the fact that it is so heavily trauma focused for a long time, the story, and it can be exhausting to read. It can be a challenge to read, and because most of the characters are dealing with one form or another of trauma, so there aren't very many healthy internally people. Carson is one of them. And I love that he's the person you've picked out as the person that you want to give a shout out to. That makes my heart happy. So, yeah,
I know.
it's an
He's
interesting
just
take.
like one of the most like morally not great. He's just like a good person. I feel like most characters, which is what I love about Hobb, is that like they are so like, almost I could see if someone wouldn't like him if he felt too perfect to them,
Yeah,
because everyone else is so like human. They have so many flaws, whereas he kind of just like, it's just good for the whole time. And in a way, it's because like we see from Cedric's like POV in that
yes,
bit, like, and he's just so like, and I do like that, like he's so like contrary to Hest, and that's exactly what Cedric needed in that moment. And I
yeah,
also love Cedric and Lise. Their like friendship means so much to me. Like the
it is.
solidarity,
Yeah, it's a
like
lovely
it's
friendship.
because she could have
I
easily just
particularly.
made it. Yeah, she could have easily just made like Cedric into this full-on villain, because he almost starts off as, and Cedric, I feel like, as much as I love him, he is like more like, at one point he's really morally grey. Like even like with his dragon, like although I like it's cute and all, like it is a bit like interesting, like their whole dynamic, like because isn't he like, you know, I don't want to get it, but like he's like trying to sell bits, yeah. So but I like that though. I like the Hob. She has like topics that aren't, they're a bit muddy, like
Yes.
they're not always. Sorry, I just started playing.
Oh
She
no, I'm
doesn't
always full spoilers. I
always.
forgot to leave the banner up from when I started.
Yeah, I really like that Hob isn't afraid to like have stuff that isn't fully spelled out. Sometimes she'll put in things that you have to sit and think about, like how do I actually feel about this? And these are the good guys, but like they've just done something, or like the ending of
Yeah.
Life Ship, like some things that happen. It's a bit like I really like that about her.
Yeah, there's very much a feeling that Hob as an author isn't giving us her judgment. She's going, these are the characters, these are their behaviors. It's up to you to decide if you like them or not. That's your call. And I like that there never feels a sense that you have to hate these characters. You have to love these characters. You can very much decide for yourself what side of that moral good or bad line that they stand on, because some of them straddle it pretty evenly. So it's always open for interpretation. So
Yeah, definitely.
yeah.
Also, before we leave Carson, I just have to say one more thing. I just love like the line in the final book when Fitz like meets Carson and he's like,
Yeah.
I just know like we would be friends in another life, or like if we had more time. Because at that point they're like going, everything's going so quick that like they have no time to talk. I don't know. I just thought like it was so like, because in a way they almost, Carson almost feels like Fitz if Fitz didn't go through so much trauma. Like I don't know. There's just a lot that
Because
like
I usually
I
relate
don't
him to
know.
Burrick. You know, if Burrick had been less broken, that's how I feel. That's the
Oh
sort of vibe I
yeah.
think Burrick would give off, that kind of, I'm okay.
Oh, I
It's
could
okay
see
to
that.
be, you know,
No, you're right. That makes more sense. That makes more sense.
or Webb, because I love Webb as well. Burrick, I
Yeah,
think,
Webb
could
is
well have been
great.
like Webb. But
Webb's another one who's just like really good. Like he just starts off a bit like you don't know how he is, but like he's kind of
they treat him like he's like, okay, this one's a bit out there.
Fitz is just judgmental. Fitz just like everyone who Fitz doesn't know, just like he's just always skeptical of. But like I love that also like about him.
Yeah. What's wonderful about the way that the books are written for me, obviously, is that we very rarely get to see Fitz from other people's perspective. Fitz's books come from Fitz's perspective, so everything is through his eyes. And yet we very quickly learn how other people see him, because that is written so well. We get to see people's reactions to him. We get to see the way they're puzzled when he doesn't believe them that they care. We see them struggle with his self-esteem. And one of the things I really loved when we met Webb was watching Fitz struggle with accepting his wit. Even though he'd lived with Night Eyes for so many years, he'd very much internalized it to the point where it's still very secret. And Webb basically saying to him, it doesn't have to be, and I'm here to help you when you're ready. And how difficult that is for Fitz to accept that this is a part of him that he doesn't have to be ashamed of.
Yeah.
And he watches Webb with such almost jealousy that he's so free with his wit and nothing bad happens to him. You feel Fitz's astonishment that somebody could actually be that open with their wit and not be frightened about it. That's a dynamic I really, really like, because it's the only time I think Fitz is honest with himself, that he's frightened of sharing his wit.
Definitely. And I just think one thing I'm really excited to learn on the reread is just like what you're saying about not only the wit, because I have so many like emotions with like the wit and like everything that you can get from it as a reader, like in our real life, like all the stuff you can relate to it, like your own struggles and your own identities, but also like just to see all of like the subtext, like with Fitz and the other characters, like how you're saying, we only see everything from his point of view, and like some of the times, like I feel like when I was reading, uh, the character, because we were in his head, like when the characters would react so like negatively towards him or like be so brash, like I remember in book 2, like when Molly's like so like flabbergasted by stuff he's doing, like I would be like just as confused as Fitz. Sometimes I feel like I would watch reviews and everyone would be like, "Oh, Fitz was being so stupid," or like, "How could you not?" And I was like, I was just as like bamboozled. Or, like I had no clue. I had no clue Molly was pregnant. Like all of this stuff. Like I don't know, just so many like things that I never put together because I was like in his head so well, and Hob does such a good job of like just I don't know, just getting you in there.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to see like how that holds up on a reread.
Mm.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, she does such a wonderful job, as you say, of putting you in Fitz's head. And that first read, you're experiencing everything as Fitz. By the time you get the whole story and you understand how all the characters interact and their histories, and you see as an adult Fitz reflecting back, and you sort of get more of a sense of what was happening, big picture. When you do go back on the reread, you can kind of extrapolate from Fitz's point of view and recognize what's happening outside of his POV. Last month, I discovered there may be an upper limit to how many times I can read these books, because
Really?
there was a very innocuous conversation happening. And because I no longer read these from Fitz's perspective, which isn't to say I'm not reading the words, I'm reading the words, but I'm very much looking at the scenes as a whole.
Broader.
And Burritt reacts to something that Fitz has said. And because you're in Fitz's head, you see him react, you get the reaction, but Fitz has no internal connection to whatever that is, so doesn't actually think about it. I'm reading this now after this many times, and I'm whole body sobbing. It
God.
hit Burritt so hard, but only because I've read it and caught all of the tiny little hints, and I've kind of fleshed out the meaning behind his reaction. Could I have that? Okay, wow, that was really amazing. Yes, I see why Burritt, responded that way. And I was like, okay, this is too much emotion for a scene where nothing is actually happening.
It's not. Let me just say,
outrageous.
it is never too much emotion when it comes to Hob. Like it'll be the most like random lines. I think that's why fans love like Tawny Man and like the later stuff so much, is because you have the knowledge of Fitz and all of the characters already. So like she doesn't even need to say anything major. She'll just plant one random line and it'll get such a huge reaction out of you. And it happens so often that like it just, she just
because
and
you've
that
had
is so
so many
genius.
books
Like
of
her
build up, and then you get a single line, and you're like, there's so much in those few words.
Yeah.
For me, it's things like Shade's boy wept. Those are 3 words, and that sentence without context means nothing. But when you've read it and you understand what being Shade's boy is to Fitz, and who Shade is to Fitz, and that he takes himself out of being Fitz for a moment and just is Shade's boy, and the connection that Shade's boy and Shade have, that simple sentence, the first time I read it, broke me completely. I was beside myself.
I like,
don't weep,
but
like
like
a baby,
I know I kind of hate Shade, and I was like in tears on, like I was sobbing. I don't hate Shade, I actually love Shade, but like it's kind of a joke that's like me and one of my friends are like, I like Shade is just like, he's written to be that way. Like he's just so single-minded, and like he's so stubborn, and he's just hot. That's another one that I'm so excited to see on a reread, like how I'll feel about him. I think it's so interesting how long he survived, because when in the beginning I always thought him as like this grandpa character. Like he was so old in my head, even though
Yeah,
like was he really? I mean, he was, but then he
but then
stayed
Fitz
throughout the
was so
entire
little,
series,
so
and then I was like, surely he'll die in Tony Man. Like, of course, nope. And then when I was like, oh, I guess he'll be dead, and like the in between Tony Man and Fitz and Fulton, he was still alive, and I was like, I don't know why I was so shocked. That sounds so mean. Like, why am I like saying
a
like
lot of
I was
people
so shocked?
are.
But then no, and then it made so much sense, and I loved that it was off screen, and I loved the Chade's boy wept like line. It's
Yeah,
so you just feel it so
she
palpably,
cuts
like
right to the heart of that relationship, and
mm-hmm,
just beautifully
mm-hmm.
done. And those little simple sentences. I mean, the way he ends in Tawny Man, Robin Hobb closes that trilogy just
Mm.
beautifully for me, and that it's finished, but it's not closed.
Oh,
And you get, I am content. Okay,
I
I've got to
literally
this
have like
point, I'm
oh
content. He's not happy. Like, that's not the word that's being used. The word being used is
yeah,
content. I accept that what I've got now is lovely. You know,
I know,
it's very different to I'm happy. And yet it's still very satisfying. You still finish that series going, wow,
I know.
best thing ever. Yeah,
I
Fitz
literally
easily.
have that like final chapter of that book of Phil's Fate written down because it was that ending is probably my favorite.
It is beautiful.
Like
Emily
I
makes a good
literally
point. Fitz could easily have had the life Shade lived, but he was acknowledged as chivalry's son, and Shade was never recognised as a royal son. And that's a really good point, in that, yes, we could have this acknowledged bastard in Fitz, and he dreads getting Shade's life. But we see so many times in the books that Shade is jealous of Fitz's life, and that he wishes he had Fitz's. So there's this kind
exactly.
of reverse kind of envy going on. And
And in a way, Shade's life is almost Shade's
that's
life is
okay.
almost like sadder in a way because it's like even though I was like saying I hate him, I don't actually, but
No,
he
but
had to just
he
live in the
changes in people's
sidelines.
opinion
He
as the
he
story
lived
goes.
in the background the whole time. He didn't get a
Yeah,
chance. That's why like I always like was so happy for him that like he got to live freely in that like time. Was
yeah,
it during Tony Man and onwards? Like he got to come out and not just stay like in his like cupboard and in his tower,
yeah,
because he has been like, and he cares so much for his brother. He cares so much for Shroud. Uh,
yeah,
I think that's why like Phil connects so much with Jade because he also like really likes Shroud and obviously we find out Shroud took him in and
yeah,
there's so much context that you get. And even though uh, I'm I'm not like the biggest fan of the final trilogy, sadly, I do love that we got it. I really love the final book, and I really like book one. It's just Phil's quest for me. Uh, I kind of like I kind of struggled with Phil's quest. Sadly, it just felt like yeah, it just felt
it
like
gets a bit repetitive.
it became repetitive,
Um,
but like even like the bits that we had with B and the final book, I loved. Like I know
yeah,
a lot of people don't like or they find it repetitive in the final one, and I'm like,
yeah,
I don't know. I think she did it the right amount. Like the whole stuff with I forget all those people's names. I only read it 2 months ago, but Devalia and all of them, like it all worked for me in the final book. Like it's just book two. I felt like the middle bit, it was just like kind of dragged.
yeah.
But
You aren't
I love
alone.
the ending. Mm-hmm.
You aren't alone. For me, I'm an apologist. I,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to apologise for being an apologist.
You shouldn't, shouldn't.
I love these books too much. For me, a lot of that book is kind of doubling down on what Full is fighting, which is
Mm-hmm.
the cyclical nature of humanity. We make the same mistakes, we do the same things. Generational trauma repeats itself. And until we start to heal from these things, until we start to do better every time, this is just going to continue. That this
Yeah.
cyclical way of being. And we see it in the way we get so many characters not raised by their own father. We get people whose father died, they're taken on by someone else, their child ends up being looked after by someone else. There's that repeating sense of abandonment, of disconnection, of missed connections.
Yeah.
That Paul is ultimately trying to stop. And this is another issue I've often come into with some people, where they've read, what's the word I want to look for? They've read a straightforward story where the aim is to bring back dragons. Like, no. Bringing back dragons is a step on the way to making the world better. That wasn't the end goal. It was a stepping stone in a direction. We don't ever get to see Full go, yay, I did my job. He's like, no, I did my part, and I've done as much as I can for the decisions that I can engage with to make those decisions go a different way. And I find that really fascinating. This accepting that change isn't just going to happen. You actually have to make every decision you make, big or small, you have to think about, is this the right decision? Ultimately, what will come of this? And that little decisions are important. Do I give this food to this person or do I give it to this person? The flow-on effect. I really love that as one of the themes in the book. So for Fool's quest to sort of be stuck in this very repetitive cycle, and how tightly that is entwined with Dwalia, works for me thematically, because she's so tightly in there wanting to keep that going.
So I appreciate what it is doing, and it's really the B and Dvalia section that I kind of don't care for. The Fool and the Fitz, like, even though they're kind of like repetitive, it just, for some reason, it didn't bother me as much. And I do appreciate what that book is doing, like just seeing, like, as you're saying, like the cycle, it keeps going back and back, and everyone is just at their lowest in that book. It seems like there's really, until like the end we go to like the Rain World, and it's great. But like, I do appreciate what she was doing with that. It's just reading it, I was like kind of
it can be really frustrating.
Especially because like I know, especially because like the rest of the books that like people don't seem to care for, like I enjoyed, like Assassin's Quest. I love when they're just traveling, just doing nothing. And I love that, like you mentioned, like the dragons returning. It's really interesting with me that like she always ends the series like where we get to the goal, but we don't really do anything after it. Like the first series ends with like the dragons as we know them then, the stone dragons coming back, and then we leave, and then we discover, oh, there actually are real dragons in Live Ship, which I love. The serpents, oh, I'm obsessed with like Malkin's Tangle, all of those sections, like when we would get with him, and was that Shriver? I forget the other Caesarea, I don't know, but like those serpents, I would like their POVs they would think of humans as like how we think of serpents, like we don't think of them as like beings. And I remember like they'd be like, why would I even care about humans? And I would finish their chapters and we would go back to like Althea and Brashen, and I would be like, why would I even care about humans? Like I would not even it would take me a moment to like step back into that mindset, because Cobb did such a good job of putting you in the mindset of these snakes. That like it would be like, oh yeah, and that's Malta and she's done this, and like it would be so disorienting. And I feel like people don't talk about this. Like most people just like read through those chapters just to get through them. But like I really like all the serpent stuff, and of course the dragons. Happy. Dragons obviously everyone loves, but like specifically when they're there, I really like what she was doing.
I loved the serpent chapters. I always have. And so it struck me very strangely when I first encountered BookTube and found that the majority of people were like,
like the prologue.
What is with these serpents? Why do I need to know about them? And I'm like,
The
This is not
prologue of
important.
Ship of
Things aren't there
Magic.
for no reason.
Mhm.
It will be important. Pay attention.
I know.
And if you do pay attention, that pays off. You get that insight quite a lot faster than if you haven't.
And like it's
And
so fun to theorize with like when you're like I think Cobb does such a good job of plot twist. Like I always am so shocked by this stuff, even though it's so obvious after it's revealed, because she
yeah,
does it at like the perfect time, and like you kind of think like, oh, serpents and like
you
there's
start to
dragons,
see
like
those
wizard bird, like you're
as she
like
reveals them.
she
Yeah.
lays it so well that it's just
Mm.
so rewarding as a reader. Like it keeps you going because otherwise, I mean, otherwise I'll still keep reading, but like it's an extra thing that just like
Yeah.
keeps you going back.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think she does time her reveals wonderfully. And something else too, and you say, you know, it's enough there that when you do get the reveal, you think, why didn't I get that earlier?
Mm.
Because, and I've said this to people, she doesn't hide any of these things. When you do go back, it's
Yep, she
obvious
never
from the
hides.
first second. You know, it's literally just having that little bit of extra awareness to look at it a slightly different way, because everything's already on page. Nothing's a secret. There's nothing hidden. And the serpents is one of those instances where once you know their story and then you meet them at the beginning again of live ships, you instantly recognize where they are in their stage of development, what's happened. You understand them completely. And it changes those first few serpent POV chapters into something very different. Because at that point, you recognize that these aren't just weirdly intelligent serpents. No, these are hugely sentient, sapient, intelligent, dangerous beings who have lost so much of themselves,
Yeah,
and the tragedy of that. And
and I
that
love
touches
like
deeply on
just
my favorite thing, that sense that memory is self. You know, I have to
exactly.
close this curtain one moment.
I love like when you see like just seeing the serpents gain the memories back. Like it's such a gradual process throughout the series, but it's so I don't know. It's just so nice. I don't even
That's
know.
better.
Like they have such a proper arc that's
They
just
do.
as valuable as the other characters or humans.
Yeah, they
Uh,
do. The the concept of memory as that, that without your memories you are bestial. You know, we get that
mm,
with the forged ones, we get that with the serpents with no memory, and we see that numbness in Fitz during Tawnyman. Again, it's on page. You see
mm.
it. You see him being numb and adrift from the world, and then you get the reveal at the end. He's lost this big chunk of his memories. Of course, he's
Oh, and the
and
whole
it
thing with
suddenly all
Fitz,
falls into
oh,
place.
I just love like how much you can analyze with Fitz. Like you can even go through like book to book, but like I feel like Fitz to me is like there's the three stages. Like
Yeah.
the first trilogy, it's like this burst of color. Like
Mm-hmm.
he's so animated. Like he feels everything so emotionally. Like he's that's why so many people find him so like aggravating. But he's like you love him, you can't help but like
Yeah.
because he's so emotional. And then Tony Man, he's so almost the opposite. Like he thinks of himself as so old, even
Yeah.
though he's not. He's only in his late 30s. But like even Tom Badger, like I remember the line where he like where they're like saying out their roles and he's like Tom Badger, like he's this, he looks like this, he's 45 years old or something, and I'm like,
Yeah.
you're not like he adds on like an extra like a couple of years
Because he
because
reckons he can pull that off.
he feels so old in that age. And part of that I think I've noticed, even though I'm not like in my 30s yet, but I've noticed a lot of people feel that way. Like when they get to that age, for some reason they just feel like I don't know, but also like how you're saying with the memories, like you don't even
Yeah.
think you forget the whole thing with the memory stone, and when it comes back, you're like, wow, like that is part of why, because
Yeah.
he's actively lost the memory. And the final trilogy is, I remember like when I was hearing about these books years ago, like when I heard that you follow him till like his 60s, and I was
Yep.
like, oh, like that's gonna be so interesting. Like he's going to feel so wise and like grown up. But I think
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting that he almost feels more young in the final trilogy, or like he's
Yeah.
trying to like grasp at like his youth and like, and again, it's like because he had the skull healing, so like he is just like arguably he has a more younger body in the final bits than he does in Tony Man,
He
or like
certainly
I
has a
don't know,
healthier one because
healthier.
of that healing. And there's this, he's missing all of his passions in Tawny Man. You know,
Hmm.
when he was young, he was
Yeah,
emotional and he would go off at the drop of a hat. You know, he's going to run through the castle with a knife because he's
yeah,
angry. You know, that sense of not thinking like an adult, you know, that
yeah,
sense of, and then we get Tawny Man where he doesn't have that passion. He has to be really forced to do anything. And then he gets his memories back. And the very first thing he says is, I have to go and get Molly. The very
yeah,
first thing he wants to do. Immediately he's got passion again. And when we catch up with him in Fits in the Fall, he still has that. He's like, I'm with this woman that I adore. And I think she's going crazy as she gets older. And I'm
yeah,
starting to feel really sad because she's starting to visibly age. And this is really tragic and awful. And now I've got a little girl and I feel really precious. There's a sense of wholeness to him that we didn't have in Tawny
yeah,
Man for obvious reasons. And one of my favorite things about Fits in the Fall is the sense we finally, I mean, for a start, B's arrival in the books is in itself
yeah.
huge. But
It's
when we
crazy.
see finally Fitz from someone else's perspective and her sense of him like a simmering pot about to boil over, and you finally get a sense why some people were very attracted to that and were
Hmm.
sort of like, okay, there's something about this guy I'm attracted to. I want to be around him. See, you know, I want to be in his space. And other people could not stand to be
Yeah.
around him. And we finally get a sense of sometimes why that might have been.
Hmm.
Because they're just like, oh, there's something. There's something with this guy.
Yeah.
I'm not okay with. And finally we see it. It's this sense of just how much power sits inside him. And I
Yeah.
did B surprise you?
And
Or did you know she was
yeah,
going to
so
arrive?
obviously I read like that, like I read Full Assassin like 4 months ago, so like it's not like I could really stay away from like the spoiler in that way. Like I didn't know at all that he showed his daughter, but like I would always see the bee emoji. Like people would always post like, "Oh, the bee emoji." Like so, I could kind of like gather, and like obviously there's allusions to bee with Molly and like the
Yeah,
Tony Man. Like and I was almost wondering like, oh, is Molly going to be like witty? Like what is like this bee that everyone keeps talking about? Uh, so I was like I almost thought for one point that like maybe one of like the bees she'll like actively like be bonded with, and that's like the bee. But yeah, so I kind of could guess in a way, and I think I did see someone say bee farcier like the word, so like I kind of knew, but
yeah,
I did not expect that like the way that it was done. So it was still like a
hmm,
surprise, and like when the chapter just starts and you're like, whoa, like who's this? But you
yeah,
immediately can tell it's not Fist. You immediately are like, oh, wow, like, this is the daughter, like, and
yeah.
it's so brilliant, and it comes at the perfect point, I think, uh, and because I think it's after Molly. Is it after Molly has died? No, no, no.
Hang on,
She
2 seconds. Keep
no.
going.
It's like it's either after she died or it's right. I don't think she has because I was able to see her with B, but Gibby's an interesting one. She, yeah, I'll wait until Derek comes back. But
Sorry. Yeah. I mean, what was I going to say? I mean, we've talked about B, and there's so much connected to B in terms of it's something that I'm currently rereading Royal Assassin,
mm-hmm,
and Burke and he are training with axes with Verity, and Burke is basically saying, why are you treating your nephew like this? Why are you throwing him out there like this? This is not how you treat someone you care for. And Fitz himself comes back with, but these are my people. I have to do this. And with B, we also get that sense from her. At the moment, she's purely concerned about Withywood's, but she claims them. They're her people, and she wants to protect them. And she gets that both from Fitz and from Molly.
Yeah.
And she acknowledges that. Of my two parents, the real killer is my mother.
Yeah.
I
You can
love
tell, like, yeah, because she had the whole, like, obviously Fitz was there, but Molly was the one she connected with the most, like, when
Yeah.
she was growing up. And in a way, like, it gets you to, like, appreciate Molly even more.
Yeah.
I've never really felt either way about her. Like, I know people either love or hate her. I've kind of just been like, I like Molly, and I love the ending of Phil's Fate. That's like an unpopular opinion because people hate like the final chapter, like with him. Like, I'm so glad he got with Molly at the end. Like, it worked. Like, it didn't feel forced or like in poor taste. Like, it felt like the right moment.
Yeah.
It felt like Burrich and Molly had, because there's a line from, I was just looking at that earlier. The line that really made the series for me was in Assassin's Quest at the end when Kettle, who I love, Kettle is talking to Fitz and she says something like, "You have to move on." Like, Molly was like part of your childhood, but
Yeah.
you can't go back to her. Like, you have to move on. You'll make
Yeah.
new memories, and it hit me so hard because up until that moment you kind of are like, or at least I was thinking like, oh, like I guess like we might reunite with Molly again. Like, I don't know, like we'd been seeing those flashbacks with Molly and Burrich, and I was like, oh, of course they have to actually show up in the book. Like, they can't just not
Yeah.
show up. I mean, Burrich was in like the start of the book, but like we hadn't seen him since then. But then for it just not to happen, and it felt like such like a slap in the face, but like in such like a real way, like a wake up like
Yeah.
call, and
It was
it
a
kind of
real
felt like
loss to him.
it
Yeah.
kind of felt like the end of like Fitz's childhood. It was like, yeah, like this is the end, and then it kind of informed the rest of the series, and clearly it has such an impact on him because we talk about Assassin's Quest all the time
Yeah.
after that book, and especially in the final trilogy, it's like mentioned every other chapter, like, oh, like the stone pillars and
Oh,
Verity and
yeah.
all this.
And the
Um,
way that it does cycle back, and it cycles back
mm-hmm.
beautifully, so that he ends up
Oh,
in the
so
same
good.
quarry, that he ends up in the same place, and that he finally understands, what Verity was going through, what it cost Verity,
Mm-hmm.
and why Verity struggled so hard to explain to him what was happening. The
Yeah.
beautiful thing about Fitz's, I want to say evolution, but it's not the right word, his growth, his, I don't know, acceptance of himself. It's very much of that Farseer is his childhood. This is him growing. This is him becoming who he is. It's also the formation of all of his PTSD. These are all of the awful,
All the
traumatic things that
struggles.
happen to this person that form who he is going to be in the rest of the series. In Tawny Man, we see almost all of the downside because he's lost his passion. So he is this hermit who grows pain drugs and wants to be isolated because it's all too dangerous, but actually has a lot of love to give. So he gets literally handed a child no one else can be bothered with, but he cares about this child so very much because he needs to care for somebody.
I love him.
You know?
I love him
And
and B.
then, yeah, and then we get
Hap
to the final
and B.
trilogy, and he's able to care for all these people, and yet he's still so guarded with himself. He's like, I can give love. He still has no idea how to receive it. And Webb comments on it when he's teaching Swift to impel rather than compel that toward a boat, because Fitz has never seen the opposite of what he calls the pushing away with the wit, the repelling. He's never seen the opposite. And yet clearly it's a thing. And that to me shows quite how deeply his ability to accept emotion has fundamentally formed him. He literally doesn't know how to welcome emotion into himself. He just
Yeah.
has no clue.
Huge
All
just
he
a
knows
blank
how to
spot.
do is have a barrier and push away. And I do wonder, when, as I say this out loud, I do wonder if Ulrich recognised that was a gap in what he could potentially have taught Fitz. Because I think Burrick had it.
Boric is such like a unique situation. It'll probably the most like I want to know on a reread. I want like everything to like reinform how I view him because he is the most like mysterious one of like if you just don't even think about anything outside of the book, if you just follow Fitz's POV, he's such a different person from what he actually is.
Yeah.
And in that way, like even right now you're fathoming like, wait, what if like this was actually going on? There's so much stuff like that that you don't even think about until later on. But there's one scene that I want to mention in case I forget. But it happens in Fool's Errand, which I think is your favorite book, isn't
It
it?
is.
It's so maybe I just haven't seen anyone talk about this scene, but it's like towards the end, and I forgot who the character is, but it's the little boy who Fitz is kind of like looking after. It's not Hap. I think he's friends with Sybil Brasinga. I don't remember his name, but he's like part of like he's witted as well, and he's like really open about it. But Fitz like really, Fitz obviously hates being witted or like hates he's like uncomfortable with it at that point. So he's like against it at that whole point. But like Fitz lashes out and like attacks this like boy, and it is so like jarring in such a like a good way.
This is in the cave where it's raining.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it is
it's the young lad
so
that shot at him. Yeah.
it's so scary. Like I remember being so like terrified. It was so. I'm so glad Hob did it. It's the most like realistic thing ever because up until that point, he kind of because right now he's kind of just like going about not feeling his emotions. We don't know why yet. Obviously, we kind of have an idea, but it's like of all the trauma he's been through, he couldn't handle this little boy being so like happy go lucky, like free and open
Yeah.
with his wit, and he just lashed out. And I remember in particular, he was like smiling after and in his head, he also is like secretly like
He's
self-loathing.
horrified
Like
with himself. Yeah.
he's horrified of himself. Like so, it's not like I'm saying he's like a villain, but he is being villainous. Like he's doing the
He
same thing that
absolutely is.
all
It's a
like that
beautiful,
Regal was,
beautiful
and
expression of
it
PTSD.
really like I was just so I just have never read anything that deep, like character wise. Seeing like such a traumatic side of like a character that you love, and I feel like most that I haven't read an author that's like been brave enough to go there.
Yeah.
Because she went there fully, and it wasn't
Really
like she
did.
was just half-assing it. It was fully like terrifying. And then obviously right after it, like Night Ice passes away, and so I feel like you kind of forget that about that moment.
I mean, a lot of people do they do feel quite a
Mhm.
lot in that moment, but it does kind of feel not skip overable, but
Yeah.
not hugely impactful to the rest of the story. So it's not a scene that generally gets focused on. When you read it with the lens of this is an experiment in trauma, we're going to look at what does trauma do to people, how does it impact their behavior, their brains, everything. And this, because I suffer with PTSD, and that scene has always resonated with me because he's inside himself watching himself do this, and he knows he shouldn't be doing it, and he can't stop it. His body has just done it in reaction to all of the emotion and all of the adrenaline and all of the things that have melded together and put him in that space where he was in Regal's dungeon. But he has some power now. In that moment, in Regal's dungeon, if he had had power, he would have lashed out and he would have tried to kill whoever was attacking him. So he's in his body. He can watch himself from inside doing these horrendous things to this young boy. He can watch himself considering killing this young man for hurting him. And he's horrified with himself, but he can't stop it. And as somebody with PTSD, that is how it feels like. You feel very much like you're viewing yourself from somewhere else going, what am I doing?
Why am I not stopping?
Why am I reacting like this? And why can't I stop it? I need to be able to stop it. And not all of us have a Night Eyes who can break you out of that moment by refocusing that energy into something you care about more. And Night Eyes knew that Fitz needed to. The only person who could have got him out of it was Night Eyes. I need you more now. I need your attention. And that's the only thing that could have broken Fitz out of that. So it's a really resonating scene, I think, for more people than would come out and talk about it on screen, because it is very almost intimate to talk about it. But that is how it feels. It's terrifying. And Fitz is scared of himself for some time after that incident.
I'm glad I brought it up, because I'd been like, that was like the scene that I think I wrote in my like diary, like it was a turning point. Like it was just, I felt like something shifted. And with Night Eyes and what you said, he almost feels like the big brother of Fitz. Like he knows immediately. He's like, I feel like I would think of this like with a best friend that you have, where if you have an issue with them, if you've upset them in some way, they know that you didn't mean it. And you know that like if like my best friend does something to me that like upsets me, also I'm going to tell her like, oh, you've upset me, but I know and she knows that she didn't mean to upset me. And that's like, I think the deepest form of like a friendship you can have, where you're going to mention that like, oh, you shouldn't have done that to me, but like you'd both know they would never do something that cruel to you. And that's what I think Fitz and Night Eyes have, that I think is so like, having that is so genuinely just amazing. And his grief with Night Eyes is like so relatable, like
that's so profound.
Because he doesn't immediately just like, I mean, maybe I'm just remembering it wrong, but it's not like he just immediately is like melodramatic and stuff, but like he's so sullen for the rest of the series. It feels like a weight has dropped and he's just like, nothing matters. Like all the stuff that happens, you don't care. How can you care about anything else after someone you love has passed away? But then there's like,
add in that it's the only love he's been capable of for the last 20 years, that you really get a sense of how deeply that's impacted him. Plus, once he's spent that time at the beginning of Assassin's Quest sharing Night Eyes' form,
I can't wait to reread the first trilogy.
They're a single entity. They're one soul in two bodies. So it's not even that he's lost a separate part of his life. He's lost part of himself. In the same way that when he gave away memories to Girl on a Dragon, he lost part of himself. Yet he didn't lose specific things. It was more a set of quantity. There was just less of him after Night Eyes left, because he retains Night Eyes to some degree.
See.
And
that makes so much sense. Like, I feel like I'm even phasming more, like, it's not just like, that's such a beautiful personification, because in real life you can't just like lose, like you're not going to meld with another person and lose part of them after they pass away, but that is how it feels. And for her to like literally do that, but not like, for me to just realize now that that's like what kind of she was saying with that, it's so subtle. Like she's so good at doing that in such a subtle way, like because he did lose a part of himself, and like
Yeah,
if
he really did.
when the Fool went away, that's also another like, because even though in Fool's Assassin and that series he's much more like resigned and like he's happier with Molly, like he almost has still lost a part of him, another part of himself, because he thinks the Fool has gone.
Yeah,
Um, and when he
because for the
gets him
same
back,
reason,
it's so
they
sudden.
merged
Like,
at the end of Tawny Man.
yep.
They, like Night Eyes and Fitz, for a moment, they were one entity. So when they separated, they both lost part of themselves.
Mhm.
When they've come back together at the very end of Fool's Assassin, and we get Fitz's recognition of
It's
this
so
is the
stark.
Fool. For all that he's horrified that he's just stabbed the Fool, there's absolutely no restraint in his relationship with Fool. There's like, nope, I'm here. What are we doing? And it's only the conflict with the fact that he's a father now that drives
Yeah.
that relationship going forward, because he would do anything for Fool, but he
Yeah.
would also do anything for B. So those two
Yeah.
differing drives is so much of his internal conflict in that last trilogy. It's only when they coincide, as we
Yeah.
all have to go to the same place, that he's like, okay, let's do the thing. But
It's so
the
interesting that she did that, because obviously I don't have kids or anything, but if she does such a good job of like empathizing with other people, because it really painted a picture for me of how it would be if something like that happened. Like if you had a kid and who you're already like struggling with raising, and but I will
yeah,
say Fitz was like, he did his best in Full Assassin. Like I feel like people are so hard on him, readers and the characters in the book. Like everyone is so mean to Fitz. Like, oh, like you
oh,
should be doing better. Like, and you're like, he's doing his best. Like like
nobody's
he
helping
had no
him.
clue that like exactly, or
The
the only
only
help they're
person
doing.
helping him was Revel. He was so
Oh
lovely.
yeah,
I loved it.
the only help that they can think of is just to take B away from him. That's
Yeah,
all Molly and them can be like. Oh, we'll help you. We'll just take her away because you're
yeah.
not doing well enough. Why don't you just like offer to like for Fitz to come over? Like I don't know. There could have been
Why
another
don't you come and stay with Fitz for a
compromise.
while
Why don't you?
so you
If
don't
you care so
traumatize this
much,
child?
if you care so much about your sister, why don't you come and live at the
Yeah,
Woods? Like I'm sorry, like I really like Nettle as well. Like I love how like stubborn she is,
yeah.
but like come on Nettle, like if you really, because I don't think you actually care about your sister that much. If you did, you shouldn't be
I
hating on
think
Fitz
I'm,
so much. Oh no, no.
I
Oh,
think
also I
Nettles
do.
as
I
well as
love
B.
I love Nettle. Sorry, I'm like interrupting you, but I just have to say this. I love
No, please.
when Nettle like is like almost not jealous, but like she wants the love that Fitz has with B, because she didn't get that. And that scene in my picture in my head, I have it so visualized of them in that
Yeah,
room, and it's like really dark. There's probably just candles, and she's just like crying, or like she just looks at Fitz and she's like, I wish I had that bond with you. And it's
yeah,
so heartbreaking, because right before it you're like mad at Nettle because she's like going on her tirade, but then you're like, no Nettle, I wish you
yeah.
had that because you
And we
deserved
both,
that.
we as the reader, know how badly he wanted to give her that. And that's the
Yeah.
tragedy of their relationship. For me, I think Nettle is quite a lot like Fitz in that her first
Yeah.
instinct is to protect herself. And I think she quite deliberately doesn't bond with B because she believes that B is simple and that she will die young. And this is self protection. I can't get too connected because she's going to die young and I will be devastated. So I'm not going to get emotionally invested here. She also has never, and she, as you say, she misses that
hmm
connection. She doesn't have that bit. And she's never understood why he continues to keep himself separate from her, not realizing that until she's really overt with wanting that relationship, Fitz is too scared to offer it. And it's
Yeah.
only as he's putting himself into the wolf that he reveals the depth of his emotion for her. And she's like, oh my God, I never knew. Oh. And that lack of openness, that lack of emotional availability is so fundamental to who Fitz is that it's still resonating through these younger people, that he wasn't able to be outwardly emotional to them. And I love that, because that's how generational trauma works. You know, it's somebody's own trauma that they don't know how to deal with, they haven't healed from, that inflicts trauma on the next generation, and then they're traumatized and they don't know how to
You
deal
don't
with it,
talk
and
about
so on
it.
and so forth. And it just was beautiful that she finally got, before he left, she got to see the enormity of how much he cared.
Yeah. And I love what you said about the generational trauma, because I even put it into that context. There's so much that you can analyze. You can take it in so many. You can keep making it bigger than it even think it is. Like the generational trauma aspect, where you don't even talk about stuff like that. You just, it's such a subtext in your relationship. Like, even though when you're looking at the other person, you know exactly how they're feeling. Like, you
Yeah,
know that
well,
they
you
know
think
how
you
you're
do.
feeling, or at least you think you do. Or like in that moment, like Fitz knew that, like how like Netto felt. Like, it's so hard to explain, but it's so ingrained, and I don't know how she does it without just saying it word for word. I think it's because you know the character so well at that point that you can, without Netto saying anything, you know how she feels just by the way she
Yeah,
looks at Fitz in that moment, and
absolutely.
it's so beautiful, honestly.
No, it is, and it's, as you say, that a lot of it is in subtext, and something that quite a lot of readers don't connect the dots for until a reread is that we did meet Fitz's mum very, very briefly in Royal Assassin, not long before he meets our Night Eyes, when he's going through the market and a woman starts screaming at him, basically, and it has to be restrained, and he's like, oh, this mad woman in the market screaming at me. And only later do most readers figure out that that was his mother. When you consider that this child, this little boy, as his memories begin at age 6, his very first awareness of himself is that his parent didn't want him. That's his birth thought, if you like. That's his, this, let there be light.
First memory.
This is, my mother didn't want me. And the and the fear of rejection is born in that opening paragraph. His own
It
mother
informed
didn't
the
want
whole series.
him. How worthy could he possibly be? His own mother gave him away. And that fear, that horror of rejection, has kept him so tied in himself that he's afraid to let his own children know how much he loves them.
Yeah.
There's just, but if you missed that scene in the market, you never come to the realization, because the subtext is subtext, that she didn't want to give him away, that her father made her give him up, that
See,
she would have claimed him, she was fighting for him. And if you missed it, it's literally a blink and miss it kind of thing, but it's there, it's on page, and it's something that Fitz never learned for himself. Again, it's that we, the reader, can see it, and Fitz never did. And the tragedy of it is, the enormity of it is mind-boggling, because you can know
see,
the
I
truth, but you
never
only know what you know.
exactly, and there's so many instances like that, but I never knew that that was the mum. I remember I seen. I almost don't know if I wish I hadn't seen it or if I had, but I seen Jimmy Knott's video. He made like this little video that was like,
Yeah,
um, something you might have
blink and
missed
did you
from.
catch it? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I watched that like after I'd read Royal Assassin, and I almost don't know if I wish I'd waited to the end of the series or not. Uh, I kind of am glad I watched it, because otherwise I think I would have thought during the whole series, oh, when are we going to meet Fitz's mum? Like, we
Yeah.
have to meet her. So I'm glad I knew that we most likely wouldn't meet her. But even then, I didn't really. It was just a kind of cool like add-on. It didn't really tell me that
No,
like
it's so
that.
easy to
But
just go, oh, okay.
but even though I didn't pick up on it based on that scene, I kind of always, I don't know why, but I always had an idea that like I don't think Fitz's mum wanted to give him away. Like even from the
Because
first
it is
scene,
there in that opening
it's
paragraph.
just it just felt like the way that like we're just imagining like this little woman, like this little girl, like I don't know how old she is, but I've always imagined her as like early 20s, like she's not really made a life for herself, and like she
No,
has this
she's a
little
young
boy that
woman.
like I always just felt like she really loved Fitz, and like and later on like seeing like the Mountain Kingdom people and how
Mm.
great they are, like I just always thought that like if Fitz had stayed there, like also we don't know like clearly with the granddad, like we don't know how he was, but like I just feel like Fitz, I don't think, like now it makes sense. I really don't think that his mom wanted to go him away.
Because she
It's a
does speak in
shame.
that first paragraph, that very first
Mm.
paragraph of Assassins of
Oh, does
Penjik, when
she?
he talks
Oh,
about how his grandfather's hand feels and the texture of the cobbles. You hear her behind them going, Father, please.
oh,
And the father throws a stone at her to make her leave. And that's all you get. The sense that she's begging. They've been arguing, perhaps, is how I've taken it. And he's won the
yeah.
argument and he's picked the child up and he's gone, I'm going now. And she's chasing after them. Father, please. So, yeah, for you to have the sense that she
Uh-huh.
didn't want to let him go is there from the opening moments.
Yeah.
As a child, Fitz doesn't make that connection. He only knows she was there and then she wasn't. She didn't fight hard enough to keep him. And the tragedy of that breaks my heart.
And I think that like disconnect for him, because it is such like a heartbreaking thing. Obviously, he goes through so much more at Buckkeep, but that
Yeah,
like abandonment is
that's the basis of it. Yeah.
so horrible that like I can't even imagine like going through that. I think him going through that at such a young age, it kind of informs like his reactions to everything else and how he is, so he just doesn't understand things fully because
No, he
he
doesn't. And then, of course, the very next thing that happens is he bonds to Nosy. So
yeah.
now he's got this
Oh
beautiful relationship with someone who loves him. And when that's severed, a lot of readers, I mean, some readers pick up on it, some readers don't. Your initial read, you think Nosy's dead because you haven't got to know Burrick yet. You don't know that
oh
that's not
oh
within
yeah, when
who
you
he is as
find
a
out,
person.
oh
But we don't know. Neither did Fitz. So Fitz grows up with this belief that someone who could kill a puppy is in charge of him.
dead, yeah.
So if this person could kill a puppy, he could kill me.
Yeah.
My own mother didn't want me. Why wouldn't he? So this rejection of emotional connection was formed so early and is fundamental to one of the most important relationships he has. The one with Burrick is still founded in this place of fear that he's going to get rid of me, that I'm not important, that I'm not something he will fight for. No matter how many times Burrick proves that I'm totally going to fight for you, boy, that
Yeah.
knowledge isn't bone deep. He doesn't trust it. He doesn't believe that he's got any kind of backing from anybody. And the way that is pervasive throughout his life, this complete disbelief that anyone will have his back, is so honest to that. Right up until his final moments, he's absolutely gobsmacked when everybody shows up at the quarry at the end because, dude, we love you. He's like, why are they all here?
It's one of the
It's
best scenes
still
ever.
so foreign to
Also,
him.
oh, I can't. One of
Just
the best scenes
beautiful.
ever. And speaking of Burrich, I think another thing like that I didn't even put together like until like you find out that like oh no, this is actually
Yeah,
like he didn't just
he's
kill him,
just his old
and
dog
I
now in
think
the mountains.
yeah, and because he's Fitz thinks of all these things of Burrich, or like oh he killed the dog, he did this. I was like almost like thinking of Burrich in like a negative way a little bit,
Yeah.
but then slowly you
And then
realize
you get
like
to
oh
know
no,
him and
Burrich
you're like,
was
yeah,
just later on like when you find out almost like the the father like generation, like Burrage and Verity and Patience,
Yeah.
like realize they were all kids, like they were all so young, like when they were like
They
thrust
really
into
were.
this, and
They
it
really
puts so
were.
much into perspective because you see like the Fitz and the full characters, like Fitz is like the Burrage age, like I mean he's even older then,
Yeah.
but like, particularly that series because you get like Lant and Spark and Pear, he
Yeah.
is like the Burrage of that group, and you realize so much of like, wow, look, this is what Burrage was feeling in these moments, and
Yeah.
even though Fitz is like rarely like openly affectionate to that crew, in his head he's so many times like, oh my god, thank God like Lant came, and thank God Per did this and did that,
Yeah.
even though he can't say it out loud sometimes. Of course, sometimes he does. In the Fool, he's always open with, but like, um, with some of the other characters, he is more like shy, I guess. And
Yeah. He
you
gets
realize
very,
like, oh, Burrich was the same way, and oh,
yeah.
yeah.
Because so
Also,
many of his quirks are Burke's, which is
mm,
why Nettle is such a wonderful character because he can see himself in Nettle,
yeah,
but in seeing himself in Nettle, he's so much of Burke that there's a weird kind of almost step sibling thing going on in that he's as much Burke's son as Nettle became his daughter. They both were brought up by this man
yeah,
who
the same
gave them
person.
their personality quirks, who I wouldn't say instilled their stubbornness, they both had that already,
Yeah,
but allowed that to sort of grow a
go ahead.
personality, you know,
Yeah,
and gave them a way to have that stubbornness about them without being cruel, because neither of them are inherently cruel. So, but they were taught by Boric. This is how you carry yourself as a person.
mm-hmm.
So when he sees himself in Nettle, there's always this element of how much of that is Boric in both of them. And it's again, it's that beautiful kind of circling back and that father figure,
Yeah. And I
non-parent thing.
love
It's
like
beautifully done.
and I love how it keeps happening. Like she does it generation after generation because now
Yeah,
with the final line being Kettrick and smiled, like I love that
yeah,
line by the way. It makes me think. It makes me look back to like her other endings because I think she is one of my favorites acting endings in general, and like specifically the lines she uses. Like the final page of Fool's Fate is like the most beautiful thing ever. Like when he's um,
yeah,
like the minstrel, like he compares like the time passing by and like with the minstrel. I can't remember the exact quote, but it's so beautiful. Like the door being left open is like the gap that a minstrel leaves, like when they're pausing in a song or something
yeah.
like that. And that's him
It's
saying
that
like
quiet
that
moment
was her
of
in a way saying like,
anticipation.
oh, like I might
Mm.
come back with theories, but like this is the end for now. So with
Yeah,
Kettrick and Smiled, it's so what's the word? It's so intentional that she placed her name at the end, and
yeah.
it makes me wonder like what will she do because Kettrick, she could have easily killed Kettrick off, but she
And
didn't.
she's
She
not a
left
young
her open.
woman at this point. She's
So
in her late 60s. She's a
so it makes me
you know
wonder because didn't she leave with B? Like I think they leave to
yes.
go to the mountain, you know. So it makes me wonder
Well,
like
they've
is
left to go to Buckkeep, but eventually,
the Buckkeep,
when
the
King
Buckkeep.
Eod dies, because he's not dead yet, which bodes well for Ketrican's future as far as longevity goes.
Yeah,
You know, when that happens, she will go to the Mountain Kingdom
yeah,
and complete her rule there with B. And
yeah,
I've always felt that's the perfect person for B to be with because Ketrican's the only person who knew, this is going to sound weird, but who knew all of her parents. She knew
she's the
Molly.
only one
She had a
stable.
relationship with Molly.
Yeah,
She obviously knew Fitz. She knew Burrick. She had a relationship with Burrick. And she knew Night Eyes. And so she knew all of who led to be. And the stories she tells of them isn't going to be tainted with fear. It isn't going to be tainted with awe. It's not going to be tainted with anything but love.
in reality, because she knows Fitz like more than like most people that are. I mean, most people that are
Yeah.
alive at that point are still there. I would say like again another thing that I always forget about like I mean, I don't forget about it because it happens at the end with like the
Yeah,
three of them
you
melding.
don't, yeah,
But like
ruminate.
they're still technically like they could show up, you know. But in terms of like the human characters that are still alive, like, she's the one who knows Fitz the most
Yeah,
and knows all the people that Fitz loves the most. And
yep,
to me, like she feels like she'll be like Fitz was like the father figure for her, and he also had like that Burrage in him that like that Nettle got. But
yep,
then, to me, Ketchikan will be like the patience for B,
yeah,
like the same way that patience kind of took Fitz in. Is how I
yeah,
imagine that she'll take in
yeah, with
B,
an
which I
open
just think
heart. I
is
will be,
yeah,
I will give you everything I can that I couldn't give previously. And we get that with Patience. Obviously, she never got the chance to have her own child, and she wanted to claim him so very, very badly, and just couldn't. Not least because of the political situation at Buckkeep at the time. But Fitz was so closed off; he wasn't
yeah,
willing to enter into that relationship with Patience, which is such a shame because we know how desperately he genuinely did want it.
yeah,
And the the beauty of the way False Fate sort of circled back was it gave everybody's repeating story a chance to end differently. So we get a chance for B to grow up knowing how to be loved, knowing how to show love. We get a stable boy and a princess type character in Per and
oh,
B that we
yeah,
that Patience and Boric never got. We get Lant and we get Ash and we get that beautiful little relationship going there that you didn't get to see with, I'm just trying to think off the top of my head who that's reflecting of, but it is of somebody. And the I'm just going to think of the names off the top of my head.
Mhm.
It's this beautiful sense that this next cycle is going to lead in a different direction than this
Yeah,
generational repeating of trauma. And there's a real hope in that because we have,
yeah,
and if we go on the magic side of it, the Fall has managed to shift the wheel of fate out of its rut, and now we're heading slightly different.
yeah,
Now we're into new potential prophecies,
yeah. And I'm
that
wondering,
Fall is
like,
able to create.
because we still don't fully know. I mean, we know how like the wit and skill relates with like the Farseers and the dragons, but I almost think there's like still like there might be something more she could do with that, and I really hope we tap into that. I mean, I'll take anything honestly,
Oh, tell me
but
about it. I'm
that's
beside
like
myself.
yeah. But that's my hope is that like we explore that a little bit more. But honestly, I like that she doesn't fully go into it all. Like she always
Yeah,
leaves the series like almost incomplete. Like she does the goal she set out for, but like the end of life ship is like the baby dragons being born,
yeah,
and that's what we spend the next series at Rainwell's
yeah,
doing. Uh,
yeah. She closes the
and
series,
then
but she doesn't end the story.
she doesn't.
There's
Yeah, she doesn't. Yeah,
life goes on,
and
and
yeah.
it's beautiful.
Mm. Speaking of Spark and Lant, that was one thing that kind of I didn't expect to happen. Like I don't know why, but like for me that came out of left field. I was almost imagining Spark and what's the name Perseverance. Like I almost saw like
Oh,
something of
okay.
them forming because I thought it was so beautiful how like Pear was like another one like Carson who is so just good
Yeah, just a
and
good kid. Yeah,
he just cares so much about B, and it was so I loved them so much, both of them. And he, even when people believed that she was dead or we shouldn't go after her, like he just did not care. He was like, "No, I'm go.
it's like, no,
I
I'm
promised to
ready
her
to
that
go.
I'm going no matter what. No one else has to
Yeah,
join me. I'm going." And it was so beautiful to see. And then with Spark, it was the only time where he almost has like a confusion because I mean everyone does like they don't know how to feel about Spark slash Ash, and I thought it was so well done, like the whole
yeah,
friendship with Pear and Spark,
hmm,
with like him thinking of Spark as like this boy who's like he's like they're mates, and then oh no,
yeah,
like she's actually a girl, or like it's more
mm,
ambiguous. But I thought it was so beautiful, like him like growing to accept her for who she is,
yeah,
and I thought that like because there was some conversation of like I don't know, they blushed, and I thought it was like this cute little like romance is turning into.
Okay.
I still love them as friends, but like that was like my thing. Like I thought that's where it was going,
Okay.
but also
See,
like
I
in the back
really
of my
liked
head,
that Ash, or rather Spark, what's the word I want to use? She's the one who ignited in the attraction with Lance. Like, she had been fascinated with him for a little while, and so she actively went out
uh,
of her way to become more feminine and to really deliberately draw his attention. And I liked that she had the self-confidence and the courage in herself to not be afraid of rejection and to be brave enough to put herself out there. And I think that that's part of that story, was that self-confidence, that self-belief that Fitz never had, that kept Shade in the cupboard for however many years, that fear of rejection, that fear that I'm different. And we see that overcome in Ash slash Spark. And I really liked
Spark
that.
is
And I
so
also,
brave.
yeah,
Sorry, not to
yeah, I
interrupt you,
was,
but Spark was. I was like in the shower earlier, and I was thinking about like this, and I was just thinking
yeah,
like Spark is honestly so like because when Fitz first meets her, when she's in like the guise of Ash, I'm pretty sure he's like impressed. He's like, oh, like I guess Shade's like new like assassins, like he really got it well this time. Because I think I don't remember how like what happens, but like she managed to like trick him or something, and
yeah,
it's such a difference from like how he first meets Lan, who like starts
yes,
like peeing himself because he's so afraid,
yeah,
and immediately it, like there was a spark. I had no clue like where we would go with Spark, but like immediately I was like, there's something different about her. Like she's just like almost even better like at being a spy and assassin like Fitz almost in some
yeah.
regards. Like she almost
She's
is like
harder than Fitz.
Shade's Shade's best apprentice, honestly, in my opinion. Like
Yeah,
she's so committed, and that's why I think it's like so nice that she is able to like come out of her shell and become Spark, because she had to like hide that part of herself. We've
yeah.
had to remember exactly her storyline with like her parents, but I'm pretty sure they like made her like grow up as like Ash, but she always wanted to be Spark. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it made me so
Well, it
happy
was, her
that like she
mother
was
was a
able
whore,
to.
so it was to keep her safe while they lived in the
Yeah.
whorehouse. So her
So
mother made her dress as a
yeah,
boy. And
yeah,
Shade, obviously, for whatever reason, had contact
yeah,
with the establishment, discovered Ash, and
yeah,
kind of was like, I can give you a job somewhere perhaps a little
hmm
safer. And, or
and
not, depending on context. But Ash, because of that upbringing, Ash slash Spark is much harder than Fitz. You know,
yeah,
there's always been a softness to Fitz. There's always been a naivety to him. You know, as much as he wants to protect himself, he's a bit of a big old softy. He struggles to
yeah,
find the evil in people, and it gets him hurt a lot. So, whereas Ash is always looking at people as, they're going to hurt me. How
yeah.
do I prevent it? I'm always on guard, and that's normal. I don't have to train myself to think like that. I just do, and that I
Maybe
think is will succeed.
maybe it's because like Althea and them all like show up in the end of Assassin's
Mm-hmm.
Fate, but she almost reminds me of Althea in a little
Yeah,
way. Like they're both so like headstrong, and like I almost could see a full series following Spark. Like why am I just thinking this little like I would love to
because it
have
would be
like
wonderful.
and
It
like
would.
if
It would be
it would
wonderful,
be wonderful. Like she's just a good character. No, but
and they
like
all are.
she just had
It
that
was, yeah.
tenacity that like Althea has. Like because Althea was never like my favorite from Life Ship, but like I always loved her. Like she was just like that's why I
There's
was so
something about her
heartbroken
that's
that
admirable.
she she was the only one who got like the shorter end of the stick. I mean, they all went through
Mm,
trauma in Life Ship, but like she was the only one who had like I
yeah, the
think she
most
had the
extreme.
saddest ending. It was just like everyone else at least got to leave on somewhat like Wintro was like becoming a king or whatever, like Malta was with Rain. She was with Brashen, but like she had to stay on this boat that like you know it was
Yeah.
just so heartbreaking, and so I was so happy to see her again in the final book. And I don't remember exactly how we leave off with them, but it seemed like it was.
Well,
I
she and
mean, no,
Brash and
because they were
kind of are
our
like,
whole.
okay, next chapter,
Yeah.
because our boat is
Yeah.
now dragons. Huh. Now, I
Which I
always loved
love, by the
that.
way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
You're going to say
it-
the same thing. Go ahead. Go ahead. I was just going to say,
well,
I
my
love
thing
that,
with
like, they.
Althea is that because that life shifts is so much about trauma. It's so much the overwhelming theme that drives that trilogy. For me, Althea not having, she could have left, but Althea and Brashen remaining on Paragon and being Paragon's captains together, for me was like somebody who's been a victim of abuse from a family member who they're never going to get away from. They're always going to be there. Even if the abuse stops,
Oh.
that person is always there. It's always going to be showing up at Christmas. It's always going to be showing up at family events. So you can kind of deal with your life without thinking about it, but they're there. And you'll just never really get away from it. And that's how that kind of felt for me. And I thought it was an interesting take on the way Althea was going to have to heal moving forward. So when we got them again in Fitz in the Full, there was a remarkable sense of freedom that came from Paragon's end, because that shared entity, that shared all of those souls, became two completely new and different entities when the dragons were released. So that sense of the person who assaulted her and did so much damage is gone. That person's not there anymore.
She can
And
separate
there's
it now.
nothing
Yeah.
tying her to this thing in her past. That all of the healing she's done over the years with Brashen and with her family, and I'm assuming everybody else, that last thing, that final thing that will have held her back from fully healing is gone. So for her and Brashen to be left walking into their new lives burden free is this a real sense of renewal for me. It's like, okay, now they get to start their real
Oh.
lives. And I
See,
loved
I'm
that
so
because
happy
it's a
you
beginning
said
rather than an
this.
end. I
Yeah.
loved it. Absolutely loved it.
Because I never even, like. Because obviously, so much happens in Assassin's Fate that, like, I
Trying
knew
to
that.
remember it all is hard.
Oh, yeah, Landspark. Yeah, that reunion was great. And, like, the
Yeah.
whole thing with the cave. But no, obviously, I understood, like, the whole thing with, like, the dragon separating and everything. But, like, it adds so much even more context, like, when you think about it in that way. Because obviously, you think of, like, it's so heartbreaking that she has to stay on this ship. But, like,
Yeah.
because you're like, oh, like, because it's in such a fantasy context. But when you take the concepts that she's saying, she's basically saying exactly what you said about, like, the having a family member who's, like, being abusive, and you just have to, you can't get out of that situation. It adds so much more context, because we've not all dealt with that, but we can all imagine, we can all relate to that experience of, like, having a family member who, like, you don't get on with well, and you have to, you're tied down to them, like,
Yeah.
and with her, she's
You
in
can't
that
get out of it.
boat.
Yeah.
You
You
can't
have
get
to
out of that.
interact occasionally. And yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a really,
Yeah,
it's a difficult trilogy to read, in particular, Live Ships, for that. And I don't blame people who bounce off it at all. That's like,
yeah,
it's hard. That's fine. I will do my best to fill you in as much as I want people to read it, because I do think it is beautifully done. It is challenging.
yeah. I
And yet when you
definitely
come to
understand
Sunwise,
when.
it's different
Yeah,
completely again.
I always get why people, because I love Ship of Destiny. I mean, my
Mm-hmm.
favorite book, I think, in the entire series is Mad Ship. It's
Mm-hmm.
between Mad Ship, Assassin's Quest, and Assassin's Fate. I
Nice.
think those three are and Fool's Errand. Oh, there's too many. But no, those three I think are my favorite.
Yeah.
Oh wait, no, Fool's Fate. I completely forgot about Fool's Fate. That's like, anyways. But Ship of Destiny I really like, but I always understand when people have such an aversion to it, just because,
Yeah.
like, even though I love it, like, I totally get, like, how that would put you off from the series, because it is such a difficult topic. But
Mm.
again, I'm so happy she liked the whole thing with Fitz and the abuse that he, like, he does. I'm so glad that she put it in this way, because she wasn't afraid to start a conversation. She wasn't afraid to, like, she didn't chicken out.
No, she
She
didn't,
wasn't
and
afraid
she
to
showed.
get muddy.
Yeah, she showed that it's
Yeah,
traumatic, and she showed that this is once it's over, it's not over. And I
yeah,
very much feel this is a conversation from Robin Hobb to all of fantasy, that you can't just
yeah.
put women in these stories, have them be
You
abused,
can't
and then
get rid
have
of
them
it.
be okay the next chapter. They're not okay.
Exactly. They're
They're
not.
damaged. They have stuff to heal from.
Mhm.
And she showed us that. And she showed us very blatantly, because she's even sort of said, she isn't going to go running into the arms of Brashen at the end of this.
Yeah.
She's going to
Uh-huh.
recoil. She's going to want to,
Yeah.
don't touch me.
And like,
And she addressed it. And I think it's such an important part. If you're going to include abuse and assault in your stories, you can't only use that bit, because that's
yeah.
only this tiny part of what it's doing. And that's what I love Life Ships for, because you see trauma from so many different angles in that story. It's
Hmm.
really astonishing.
Yeah, same with like Wintro and his whole relationship with Kenneth is
Yeah,
almost like it's just I would say it doesn't go that far, but it's really
it's
really
it
toxic
it
and
teaches.
it does and almost like his whole thing with Althea almost feels like he is going after Wintro at the same time because he thinks of
Yes,
Althea and Wintro so similarly. Like
yeah,
he
and
almost
that's the
goes after
attraction to it
Althea
for him.
just
Yeah,
because that's why like some yeah exactly and so many people think he's like bisexual code because he is so like he's so obsessed with Wintro, but
mm.
it's in such a evil way. Like it's not like healthy.
Yeah,
And Kenneth in particular, I'm really curious what you think because I know some people are like are so taken aback by everything that happens, but to
mm.
me it's so obvious from the beginning because I love Kenneth's character. Like he's honestly one of the best written characters I've ever read. But it's so clear that like we root for him, but like we're not fully meant to empathize with him because he's doing
there's
good
nothing to
things, but
empathize with.
he's so like uh what's the word? Like he's so seedy in his
He's
internal
cold.
monologue
He's
from the
he's
beginning,
emotionless.
from the first chapter. He's like that,
Yeah,
and so I'm always like wondering like did other people read like his like internal monologue in like a humorous way, like haha, like we're and obviously you can laugh like in like a dark humor kind of way,
yeah.
like like first love characters are like when they're doing bad things, but like with him,
I
it's
had
so
quite a
clear that
journey
like
with Kenneth.
he's
I
yeah.
when we reached the end of Ship of Destiny, my first time reading through that, I felt betrayed because I thought we were on a
Oh,
redemption arc. So I had a lot of anger
oh,
and betrayal in that sense. So I mean, I felt personally hurt on top of what was
mm,
happening, because like, no, he was supposed to be our redeeming
yeah.
hero.
Well, I don't know how I'd feel. I'd be
And rereading
terrified.
was a very different experience, because it immediately I locked onto the fact that actually, no, he was irredeemable from the beginning. I just
Yeah.
wanted him not to be. And it was only when he acted in this way that I couldn't deny it anymore,
Yeah.
because that was the first time he did anything. Everything else was a reaction to a situation or a comment.
Yeah.
He was never proactive about anything until he
Hmm.
assaults Althea. And the realization of that was really eye-opening, that she could write this character that you kind of didn't notice that until a reread. That was astonishing to me. But it also proves that there's this, again, with this memory of self, because Paragon had taken everything from this abused child, he was literally not capable of healing because he didn't know he was damaged. So
Hmm.
the point that is made at the end of Ship of Destiny, where Paragon takes Althea's pain and he
Hmm.
doesn't take the event, is the difference between why she can heal and why Kenneth couldn't. Because he took the event itself, Kenneth had no chance. He had no ability, no opportunity to integrate that trauma into himself and heal and become healthier. I mean, he may never have been a nice person, but he would have been whole. He wasn't. He was partially forged to some degree.
Yeah.
So there was never a chance for him to get better. It just wasn't possible.
And you get that sense from the beginning, even though I'm saying like he's like villainous, like you can tell from the beginning that there's something strange about, like, even though he's having fully formed thoughts, they always feel like strange, and like there's the whole mysticism with like
There's
his
something
charm
missing.
thing, and
Yeah.
you're like something is going on here, and I didn't put together that like he was from that family that Paragon was in, and I was like, oh, like,
it's another
and you
one of
feel
those.
like,
Oh, how did I miss that?
yeah, and you
Yeah.
feel like so sad for him because of what he was put through by his father.
Yeah.
I think it was his father, on that ship, and you feel like you understand why Paragon cares so much for him.
Yeah.
But yeah,
But
I
and there's
hate
that sense that
the
he was a
yeah,
victim too, is separate. It's kept separate
yeah,
from Kenneth because his victimhood
yeah,
is separate. It's been cut
yeah,
away from him. And it's only when he dies that he's able to be not even reunited with this pain, because at that point he's not a person, he's just memories.
yeah,
But those memories form a whole that
yeah,
can then be integrated into Paragon. But the separation of the victim that we have learned through the series, because we get these memories from Paragon, is, and we get flashbacks from Kenneth, that separation of a traumatic event and the person who suffered the traumatic event explains Kenneth. That's this is why he's Kenneth. And I like that Paragon makes the point at the end of saying to Althea, I've left you the event. I've just taken the pain that isn't yours, that was inflicted on you by him. And it's, what's the word? The technicality of including that separation is important, I think.
no, definitely. He's someone that I think I'll learn even more on rereads. Like, I don't even know. There's so much depth there,
There's so much. It's
and with
seriously, it's
so many
ridiculous how much is in
characters,
this book.
it's nuts. It's honestly nuts. And with Life Ship in general, they're so tightly packed. Like, there's so many characters, and there's this scene. I think it's chapter like 32, 33, 32 in Ship of Destiny that was like one of the most cinematic scenes I've ever read. It's like everything comes together. All the characters are
Yes,
there on the boat,
the ships
and
are
it's
there, and
so wonderful. And I'm always so flabbergasted when people are like, when even like fans like are when they recommend the series and they talk about how like it's character focused, and it is, but that scene, like, it was so action packed to me. Like, I could not like
it's
understand. Like,
epic
I was
in the
so,
truest sense.
it's so good, and you're flipping between the POVs, and like Malta and like I think Althea are like underground, or like under decks, and like they're looking at the window, and the Brashen's on like another boat or something, and then Tintaglia's coming, and then Tintaglia drops Rain,
Yeah,
and you see like the
and there's so much
changes in
happening.
them, and
Yeah, so much
it's
happening. It's
so brilliant.
beautiful.
And there's kind of like that scene in each of the Life Ship books. I think like at the end of each book, there's always a explosive moment, which I really like,
Yeah,
in particular about those.
Life
I
Ships is
wanted to
absolutely the
mention,
technically
yeah,
best written trilogy in terms of
yeah,
this is one complete story that
hmm,
flows beautifully. That all of these
yeah,
things all tie in beautifully, and it's if you don't bounce off it because of trauma and quite how dark it is, then you're going to love it because
yeah.
it's amazing.
I don't know how you couldn't like that series. Honestly, like, it's just so, it's so
I mean,
brilliant.
but
It's
this is the
brilliant.
thing. I can see why people bounce off, and of those I've spoken to who are willing to talk to me who have bounced off it, it hasn't been because the writing's bad. If anything, it's because it's too good. It's too real. It's too dark. It's too relative to their lives, It's too emotional to deal with right now, which isn't a criticism in my book. You know, if you've got stuff in your past and you can't read this because it's too hard, that's not a bad thing. You know, it's a sad thing because this is the person who perhaps needs to come back later and read it later, but it's not because it's a bad book. But you know, I mean, we've jumped around a fair bit and we've kind of skipped over Rain Wilds, which a lot of people tend to do, to be fair. But I have, over the rereads, I have come to love it more and more, and I do my best to sort of try and get people in an accepting frame of mind to go into Rain Wild, because I think that that's important, because that's as thematically strong in my mind as Life Ships, in terms of agency and free will and the societal burdens of being alive. If you are alive and you're part of a group of people, you have a burden to be part of it and be part of how it's, you know, governed and arranged, and its rules and its unwritten rules, and if you go along with it, then you're agreeing. And if you fight it, know what you're fighting. Don't just be fighting for the sake of fighting. And the themes in that do work for me in terms of why the publishers wanted to throw it at a YA audience. I still think that a lot of YA audiences wouldn't have necessarily got a lot of the theming.
Oh, they wouldn't have.
Yeah, but
I think Rainwell's...
Hest was far more villainous than Kennett. She hates him far more than anyone.
Oh God, yeah, Hest was like up there. Regal, Hest, Kyle. Kennett just doesn't, like, he's a horrible person.
There's too much nuance to Kennett.
Yeah.
But Hest is an evil person.
Yeah. But in a way, you almost get more nuance with Hest in terms of like the three, like Kyle, Regal, and Hest. I feel like you see, even though I feel like Hest is just as like deplorable, you see more side of him than you do with Kyle and Regal, in my opinion.
You do, because he gets a POV, which neither Regal nor Kyle
but he's still evil. He's so disgusting.
And those POVs are horrible because he's just this. He's just a horrible person. One of the things I loved in Rain Wilds was the Hest, Cedric, Elise situation, because it's only when they're honest with each other that Cedric and Elise realise that they both kind of abused spouses. He's treated both of them so horribly. Then we find out how long this relationship with Cedric went, and that really it was predatory. It was
like grooming.
Hest groomed him and formed him how he wanted him. And there's an evilness to that Elise was spared, that kind of helps their friendship when they realise that, hey, if anyone's going to help me heal from this, it's you, because you know what this feels like. And that they kept their friendship. Beautiful. I loved that they remained friends.
To me, obviously, like I was saying how much I love Cedric and Carson, like their relationship means so much to me, but I respect Elise so much for, like, because it would have been so easy for her to, like, because she got with Leftrin, like she had her own thing, for her to just leave out Cedric, because he did hurt her as well, because he went along with Hesta's plan, but he was being preyed upon by him, so he went along with it because he didn't have the power to not go do that, basically. Like, he was in this situation, and so for her to, like, have the olive branch and to accept him and be like, I forgive you, and then to, like, recognize that, no, you also were abused by him, you also were hurt by this man that hurt me, is so beautiful. And I just love them so much, and it's just, I can't even explain in words how much them two in particular mean to me, just because they finally both have, like,
they have healthy
their own partner.
Yeah,
it's like almost like wish fulfillment, but like I don't even care, it just works. Like, I just it's so it makes me happy, like, because everyone always
I love that, because
going through pain. for them
it
to
almost
like,
kind of makes up for how much negativity there has been in so much of the series, is that we
yeah,
do get these lovely people in Rain Wilds. And for all that
yeah,
Leftrin begins doing something a bit dodgy, because, you know, you're kind of like, he's using a Rain Wild,
yeah,
you know, this dead cocoon,
yeah,
he's stealing. And you're like, well, okay, is this guy a good guy or not? You know, he's bribing people to stay on a ship and not tell his secrets. You know, okay, maybe he's a bit shady. But you grow to find out that no, he and Tarmin have got this beautiful relationship, which again feeds into Tarmin and Leftrin have taught each other how to be in a healthy relationship. That when he meets Elise, he's just dumbstruck. He's like, oh, this woman.
yeah,
And he gets the
yeah,
seal of approval from Tarmin. And Tarmin's like, yeah, okay, I quite like what I'm seeing of this lady. And Tarmin, obviously, as a live ship, can see into her heart far more clearly. And he gives the okay. He's like, yeah, okay, we can do the thing. So we get this healthy acceptance of each other that Elise has never felt before, because she's always felt like an outsider, that Leftrin's never had before, because he's never had someone willing to be a part of his life with Tarmin. And then when we meet Carson with Cedric, there's a gentleness to Carson and a willingness to wait and to just sort of say, I'm here when you're ready. I will have, I've got your back. I'm not going to be mean. I'm not going to be cruel. I'm not going to say hurtful things. But we do get a moment of anger out of him a couple of times where he doesn't hurt Cedric, where he's just angry.
yeah.
And Cedric's shock at, hang on, we can have an argument and not beat each other up? I don't understand.
It's
And
so
you
good.
see that and it's very Burke-like again, where with a shy animal or an animal that's been abused, I'm just going to stand here and let the animal know that I'm safe to be around.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful
And
to see those characters.
I love that they both immediately get that love from their partners, because it's so and also mentioning Carson, you'd be like, I love that Carson, you don't see many like male characters, like male relationship, for him to be such like the romantic archetype,
because he is a very romantic man. You know,
you
he
just
does
don't
some
see that
beautifully
with
sweet things
in fantasy series in this way, so I really appreciated that as well. Because you either see like the Hess, like the villain who's like the gay villain who's like evil, or they just, I don't know, you don't really get like the romantic love interest.
It's very
in that
rare
way.
that you
And
get a
these
gay
kind of
character
fantasy series
anywhere that isn't feminized. So to get him so masculine still and have those very overtly masculine qualities, and yet have this beautiful side to himself where he's not ashamed of
so
who
caring,
he is or who he loves, and he's not prepared to hide it. And he's like, why should I? And yet he's also not going out of his way to make people accept him. It's like, well, either they do or they don't. Whether they do or they don't is not up to me. There's beauty to Carson's character, where I think of almost everybody in the series, he's the one truest to himself.
Exactly.
He knows his own worth, and he doesn't have to prove it to anybody.
He doesn't care if anyone else, what they think about him. He doesn't care what they think about him, his dragon, Cedric, his whole work with like the wood and all this. Like, he has so many different facets to himself, and he's so sure of all of them. It's so it's wonderful.
I think he's just a wonderful, wonderful character, and it's shown almost in the way he treats his nephew Davy, where Davy's not frightened to be himself and to say, well, can I do the thing? And I quite fancy that guy, you know. He's not backward coming forward, Davy. He's not embarrassed about himself. He's not ashamed. He doesn't carry himself with any sense of fear that he's going to be hurt for showing a preference that isn't the usual. And that courage can only come from knowing he has a safe place to fall. You know, his uncle has got him. His uncle will make sure he's okay. And to be able to see a healthy family in any Hob book. Kind of nice. But it's also that proof that they exist, and people who have been through trauma and who have had family generational trauma that makes them wary of healthy relationships or unable to be part of them. That's a frequent thing. You don't see it because it's not part of your own life. The people in your life aren't healthy in themselves, and so they're surrounding themselves with other people not healthy. And it feels like a culture shock to discover that there can be entire communities of nice people. It feels very strange. It feels very otherworldly. And do we trust this?
I know.
This seems too good to be real.
Yeah.
When really it should be the norm.
It's just good. Yeah.
You know, I love it. But we see it. We see it like, oh, it's achievable. You, you can be in a loving family. You can have people who care about you. And we get that in Rain Wilds. At the same time as some of the most extreme toxic gender behavior in that series, and the fallout from it, and just I think Rain Wilds is a good example of evil happens when good people do nothing, because these children have been allowed to be ostracized, have been othered when they didn't need to be, and that very pushing out of their own society makes them form their own, but they don't understand their own society enough to form their own in a healthy way. And we see that, and it's really astonishing to watch that develop.
And you see that again with the final trilogy when they go back to the Rain Worlds, and how like they go like Fitz, when they discover that like he can heal them, like they, even though like they've discovered all these elderling artifacts, they are such a new community. And I almost wonder what they'll be like once they've really set up, if they will become like, so I don't know if they'll become a better community, or if they'll end up like having similar like prejudices and stuff that like their community did with them. Like they ostracized their I think they're called Rainwell changed people is what they call them, like the ones who like,
because there's also no established elderling community where I imagine in the history of the world, the longevity of the elderlings will have got rid of a lot of those biases. Where you get to a certain age and you really genuinely realize that it's just not important. Mostly we're all the same, but they're still young individuals with no older elderlings to kind of guide them in terms of, you're going to be exceptionally long-lived. You need a different mindset just to live that long. So I'm interested to see where that goes, very much. Also, the world is full of some reasonably nasty people, because that's just the way the world is, who are going to want to come and attack, steal, damage, whatever, the elderling city now that it's been found. Yes, they have dragons. The dragons don't all live there all the time. How is that going to work? How is it impacting the political structure of the world? Chelsea's just fallen. It's under completely new leadership. It's being ruled by a woman, for heaven's sake. There's civil war happening. The Six Duchies, okay, it's pretty stable. Yay, hooray for that. Jamalia's not. They're going through all sorts of uprisings. Slave trade is completely demolished. They now have to deal with dragons. Like, there's so much.
Can I just say, I always found it so ridiculous when reading Live Ship, when all the characters like look down on Six Duchies and they're like, they're barbaric and backwater and this and that. And I'm just like, yous are the ones that have allowed slavery to come back. Like, sure, it came from Jamila and whatever. And all the characters we like are like against it or whatever not, but like, you let them back in. You are the ones who have life ships who are essentially slaves in a way.
Slaves.
And it's like, and you're looking down on Six Duchy people. And I never really got, like, and I always thought of them as more like the standard, like, fantasy archetype, like the monarchy and stuff. So I was always like so shocked when we go to the Cursed Shores and they're like, look down on Six Duchies people. And I'm almost wondering, like, where that comes from. Like, are they just like, I don't know. It's
I
really
think I
interesting.
actually think that's a nod at a lot of colonization that happened.
That's
I
what I'm
mean,
thinking because I don't know what else.
it's a very
Yeah,
Victorian kind of feel, Bingtown. There's a
yeah,
sense of this, high class society ladies going to tea.
hmm
There's a very tightly bound Victorian sense to that.
yeah,
Particularly in that it is a colony of Jamalia, and they're trying so desperately to be Jamalian. And there's this, I mean, everybody in the world thinks they're better than everybody else in terms of, their
yeah,
jingoism, my country's best. So I think that we're seeing that reflected. But there's also this sense of the time being different, in that the Jamalia, the Bingtown story, again, feels very Victorian. It feels very expansionist. There's this,
yeah. Let's
I don't know
conquer.
what the word is. They're far more about looking outward. I mean, they're coastal. They don't seem to have too
Yeah,
much going on inland. They're all about the trading. So they're on the seas. There's this very kind of, oh, we're all windswept and interesting. We're fabulous. Whereas
hmm
the Six Duchies is far more insular, and they're far more inward looking in terms of they've got land on the inside of this coast. They're
community.
looking after this great landmass, and they feel like they're closer in terms to perhaps, Elizabethan rather than Victorian.
hmm
So there's this sense that, well, they're uninformed savages. They're just barbarians. They still live in
Yeah,
stone huts, rather than we've come so much further and we've developed so much more, and we have devalued our poor to the point where they are now belongings. Is
hmm
some kind of uh, growth, some kind of evolution. We've put value on so many things. It's different in the duchies. They're not too
no,
far removed
definitely.
still from a bartering system in the Six Duchies.
Yeah,
So, you know,
and there's so much more with so many different areas as well. Like obviously with
mm,
Clary's, there's a whole different thing with islands. With like the whole thing with the Norcheska and her people. Like they have like a
yeah,
matriarchy. Like there's so much that she has done with all the different areas
yeah.
in the world.
And you look at
With
the mountain
Chalced
people, this sort of nomadic
and people.
lifestyle that we get to look at there, and
hmm
she does very well with how jarring that cultural differences are between characters.
hmm
I think that she does that particularly well.
Yeah.
So,
Uh, One thing I want to mention because I know we're like nearing on 2 hours, so probably probably I could go on forever honestly, but
tell me
like
about
it's like
it.
midnight, so like I probably should go soon. But
Yeah,
in case
we'll
I don't want
start
to miss
winding up
this,
in a sec.
uh, there's this like really there's so many lines I had written down. I didn't get to any of them, but there's one that when Fitz meets the hedge witch, I forgot her name from
Jenna,
Twenty Man. Jenna.
yeah,
He's like says, "There's little in life so reassuring as genuine welcome." I just thought that
yeah.
line was so because like when you meet a new friend, like when you're just like, I can be like open with them. It's so nice. But I wanted to say like I really found her whole plotline really interesting. Like because you think it's going to go somewhere. You think, oh, they're going to have a deep friendship. Maybe it could turn romantic. Who knows? But like you think she's going to be someone who'll stay in his life for long, but she really rejects him after she finds out he's witted. Like, and it's so
When he
it's or like
proves
that's
to be
the
witty and
when
hurts
you put through
somebody,
it
yeah,
when you hurt somebody, it just like I don't know. It just really oh I'm remembering things wrong, but I just the thing that I took from it is like you could have such like a nice bond with someone or you you can get on so well with someone, but they could have this innate hatred for something that just
yeah.
goes
And then you
beyond that,
discover
and
they're bigoted in some way. Like,
they'll be stuck in their ways, and it's such a mind f like moment where
it
you're like,
really is,
how like you
because it taints
you
them
really care for this
immediately,
person, yeah,
and it taints
and
everything to do with them.
they
And you're like, oh,
yeah,
if you're
and it just
capable of
like
that,
almost yeah, but what you do to
yeah,
yeah,
it isn't nice.
that's
And I thought it was an appropriate thing to put in the book. because it's something that he's so frightened of, that being rejected for his wit. So to find that he's being treated as almost an experiment for his wit is just as offensive. And
it
then
almost
to be blamed, to have his violence blamed on the wit when it had nothing to do with his wit, but everything to do with, supporting his king. And to have it blamed on his wit, everything about it was so offensive because it all came from such a point of bigotry. And
and from such a safe space for him, like that's why like it's so even more sad, because that like he finally got, that was like the one thing that he had, like, well, not one thing, he had a couple other things, but like that series where he could go to our house and be with the cat and like drink tea and stuff, and for that to be ruined was so sad.
He was so vulnerable with having
it almost like
lost
helped
Night
him in a way, like
to have
with his own, with his with his own.
It was really awful, and it was awful not least because the Fool was there, and the Fool wanted to be who helped him through his grief. I love that it was Ketchikan ultimately who did, and I get why her grieving was different for Fitz than the Fool, because she had her own relationship with Night Eyes. So when she was grieving, she wasn't grieving because she felt bad that Fitz felt bad. She was grieving because she missed Night Eyes. And I thought that was a really nice distinction between them. But however, on that very sad note, I should probably let you go to bed if it's nearly midnight. So is there anything in closing that you would like to say about having finished The Realm of the Elderlings?
No. Sorry, like.
No? Yes, no?
What will I say? I feel like it's such like a loaded question. Sorry if I'm like breaking up, because I think you were like breaking up for me for a second.
Oh, apologies. I will try and do better. Oh, we've lost Ray. But okay, I think we'll call it. We've covered all the things we were going to cover. Thank you so much for joining. If you're watching back later, again, thank you for joining. Ray, I have linked in the description. He is relatively new to BookTube, but that's okay. We welcome everybody. If you have any thoughts or comments, please write them down below. I try and answer them. I'm not very good at doing it in a timely fashion, but I will get back to you. Oh, we've got him back. Here we go. We can have a farewell properly.
I don't know what. I'm sorry. I don't know what was going on. It was like you were breaking up for a second there, and then I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry if I'm breaking up," and it just. I'll say, okay. I don't know what my final thoughts would be, because there's so much you could say that I don't even know. All I can say is like, the series has really changed my life and changed the way that I not only read books, but also that I am in person. Like, it's really made me more intuitive. And like, I was on holiday. I was visiting my family in Pakistan in February, and I felt like I was like living a Robin Hood book. Like, I felt like I was in my own fool's errand, because we live on like a really rural area with like animals. Like, we get our own milk from the cows, and like it's so like similar to everything that Fitz was doing. And I felt like, oh my god, I'm living out like this like fancy almost in real life. It was so like, so Robin Hobb has really made me so intuitive, and all of her like nature descriptions and everything. And so yeah, I love everything that she's done to me, not only as a reader but just as a person. She's made me, I feel like, definitely into a better, more empathetic person. And I just hope that I get more out of it on rereads. I'm sure I will. I immediately wanted to start after I finished, but I held myself back. So yeah, that's what I think I would say. There's so much I could say, but I don't even.
That's fine.
I don't even know.
Hey, there's been plenty of content, so we can always add more. Thank you very much for joining, and thank you for offering to come.
Thank you so much for having me.
I love it so much. And
no, I knew when I was finishing, I wanted to go. Yeah.
Well, I'm flattered. I am genuinely flattered, and thank you. So thank you for coming. As I said, your channel is in the description for those of you who have followed me and are now being introduced to you for the first time. And for those who have followed you to me, welcome. You're welcome back anytime. And we shall hopefully catch you again soon. With that, we are going to love you and leave you.